Hi there, Booktube, it's Roz, and as I speak, it's the last day of May, and I haven't yet done a TBR Pile of Possibilities video for June. So here it is. Now, why do I do these TBR videos? 3 reasons. There's 3 reasons why I like to do these, and even when I'm not managing to do lots of other videos, I do them. One is I really enjoy planning and kind of anticipating what I'm going to read. And so doing a video about it kind of gives me extra scope for that, helps crystallise my plans for the month. Reason number 2 is that it gives me a chance to mention some of the lovely reading events, readathons, group reads, and so on that happen in the Booktube community. And I love to do that because it's what makes it more than just people making videos. It's what connects us readers, and it doesn't matter whether you have a channel or you're a commenter. You can take part in those things and have shared experiences, which is lovely. The third reason that I do it is because I love the comments. I love it when people say, "Oh, I've just read that, it was really good," or "I read that years ago. I don't remember a lot about it, but I do, or I'm thinking of reading that," or So that always is an extra pleasure for me. So let's go for it. Now, I said that one of the reasons for doing these is mentioning kind of reading events that are happening. And one very lovely reading event that is happening in June is hosted by 3 of my good Booktube friends, all of whom I've now met in real life, Charlie and Jack and Jem. I'll put details below. And they're doing something called Joy Reading June. And this is kind of a prompt-free readathon because their instruction to us is to just read things that bring you joy and talk about those. And so I'm hoping that the things I've picked for this month will bring me joy in various different ways. But there's not like one specific book that I'm picking for this. I'll hope overall that it's going to be a joyful reading month for me. I think it might be. Part of that is I'm trying to not sort of overreach myself in my June plans. So there are some lovely June events that I'm not going to be taking part in, but I will quickly mention a couple. One is June on the Range, which is to read westerns, in June. And each year I think, I want to give that a try because it's not a genre that I read, although weirdly I did read one in May, although it was written by an Irishman. But yeah, maybe next year. We'll see. Maybe next year I will grasp the nettle and combine June on the Range with Big Book Summer, I'll come to that later, and actually read Lonesome Dove that everyone tells me I should, but don't tell me that now because I'm not going to do that this year. Another interesting sounding reading event, but I'm not going to get into that in June, is Summer of Sport. So reading books that have got some kind of link with sport in them, not necessarily non-fiction about sport, could be, a novel where sport features in it. Again, might take me a bit out of my comfort zone, but as I say, I may turn up something for that in June, July or August, but not in June. Now, before I go any further and talk about the things that I am reading, what the events they might be connected with, there's one book, when I say that I said I was going to read in May, that I've started but haven't finished. So I will be reading this in June, but I will just mention it briefly first because I have already started it, and that is My Friends by Hisham Mattar, the British Libyan writer. It came out in 2024. Everyone tells me it's wonderful. Well, the bit that I've already read, that I've just started, is very promising. It's about Libyan exiles living in London and follows them over a period of about sort of 20 years. So that's that one. So let's talk about June things. Now, each month this year, I've got one book that's sort of pre-selected in advance because I am co-hosting with Katya of Page Turners with Katya, the kind of contemporary strand of Reading the Globe, which is a year-long event reading things in translation and world sort of literature from around the globe, call it that. Our June book is one that I'm looking forward to. I mean, every month I'm looking forward to it, but I'm particularly intrigued, I think, by this one because it's The Third Love by Hiromi Kawakami, and she is a best-selling author in Japan and quite well known now in translation, but I have never read anything by her. And if I enjoy this one, I have Under the Eye of the Big Bird kind of lined up perhaps to read later in the summer too. And that was on the International Booker long list, short list. Yeah, one or the other, maybe both. This is translated by Ted Goossen. It came out in Japan in 2020, and the English translation came out in 2024. So it's relatively new, and it's set. Well, the main character is a woman in present-day Japan, but then she kind of goes back in time to periods in a few different periods in Japanese history, and that helps her kind of find herself, work out what she wants in her present-day Japanese life. Sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds intriguing. So join us if you fancy. There's a Discord group, I'll put a link below, where we have brilliant group of readers have brilliant conversations about the books, so not too late to join in. There's another strand to Reading the Globe, well, a couple of others, and one of those other strands is reading translated YA and middle grade books, and I'm dipping in and out of that some months, and I am joining in with the June choice, which is Kiki's delivery service, because on a bit of a Japanese roll here. This is by Eiko Kadono, and is something of a modern children's classic in Japan. It was published in 1985 and still very well loved. It was made into a Studio Ghibli animated film. The English translation was, I think, made in 2020, and it was translated by Emily Balastrieri, and it has a trainee witch and a talking cat. So, what's not to love? In fact, this could be my most joyful joy reading June book. Maybe. We'll see. Now, while we're talking about joyful things happening in June, Katie Lumsden is celebrating in a week into June. She's celebrating 10 years of her channel, Books and Things. 10 years. Brilliant, isn't it? And so lucky for all of us that, Katie started that and is still around doing it. As sort of to celebrate that, and inviting us to sort of join her in celebrating that, she's doing just a week-long reading event where she's suggesting, if we like, we could read a book from one or the other of both, or both of her sort of favourite sorts of books to read. Okay, and the things that Katie loves best are historical fiction and classics. And so I'm saying yes. Now, both two of my favourite sorts of books to read, as it happens. So not a tricky ask. About a month ago, Katie made a video, and I'll link to it below, about her 30 favourite historical fiction novels or books, and lots of those 30 are books that I've loved and read, but a few that I haven't. Most notably, the book that she chose as her number one favourite historical fiction book of all time is The Wonder by Emma Donoghue, and I've never read that one, so obviously that's the one that I'm going to read to celebrate Katie's channel. And it's set in Ireland, and it's about a woman who goes to sort of be kind of like nurse cum nanny to a little girl who is supposedly not eating. Interesting. Anyway, Katie says it's brilliant. We shall see. As it turns out, there is a month-long readathon that the Wonder also fits with, and that I'm absolutely engaging with, and that is the Historical Fiction Readathon 2025. It's got one of those, names that's, just literally does what it says on the tin. It's about reading historical fiction for a month in 2025. It's been running a few years, few hosts, and one of those hosts is Charlotte of Coiny Reads, who's a booktuber that I know and see as a friend. So there are a few prompts. A few of the things that I'm reading fit with various prompts, but there's some that I've particularly chosen, to go with the prompts. And one of those is this, The Mare by Angharad Hampshire. Now, the prompt is to read a book, a historical fiction that's based on the life of a real person. And this absolutely is. It could be a slightly grim book to read, I think. In fact, the two people who recommended it to me, Katie of Books and Things, and Ben of Ben Reads Good, who kind of gave me his old copy, have warned me that it is a grim book. Why? Because it's about it's a fictionalized retelling of the life of Hermine Braunsteiner, who was a sort of ordinary Austrian girl before World War II and became a concentration camp guard, and did dreadful things. And then when the war ended, managed to slip away and went back to being an ordinary Austrian woman, and met and married an American man and moved to America and was a sort of well-loved wife and friend and neighbour, and then her past caught up with her. Sounds absolutely fascinating, although also a bit, grueling potentially. For another of the prompts, I'm reading a book which was recommended to me by Eric Carl Anderson. He made a video about it, which I'll link to below. And that's Days of Life by Megan Hunter. Now, this also was sort of inspired by a real-life character, but also it fits Charlotte's prompt, which is to read historical fiction linked in some way to art. So this is a hot, off-the-press new book. This one was 2024, I think. Maybe even 2025. This one, absolutely 2025 new release, came out a few weeks ago. And it's loosely based on the life of, or inspired by the life of, Angelica Garnett, who was a painter. Who's Angelica Garnett, you say? Or you may be immediately recognise the name, but if you don't, she was the daughter of Vanessa Bell. Vanessa Bell being Virginia Woolf's sister. Vanessa Bell is, of course, a painter. So she's a painter, and her parents were both painters, Vanessa Bell and Duncan Grant from the Brooms Group. It starts with 19-year-old protagonist, not called Angelica in the novel, Ivy, and a pivotal kind of day in her life when she was 19 in 1938. And then we get kind of 6 more days in her life, sort of spread over the following decades. Just kind of historical fiction that appeals to me very much. And anything that sort of links in with that world of Woolf and Bell and so on has a kind of added attraction, I suppose, for me, if it's well written, which Eric tells me it is. Now, I've also got some planned kind of group or buddy read books for this month, and one of those is this, During the Reign of the Queen of Persia. Now, that makes it sound like it might be another kind of historical fiction, but it isn't really. This was it's set in the 1950s, but it was originally published in 1983. And so, like, the kind of definition of historical fiction, I mean, you can argue about it, but it's generally things from, say, 50 years before. The main setting of the book needs to be 50 years ago, say, or longer. Why am I reading this slightly obscure American novel published in 1983 by Joan that's set on an Ohio farm? Because I'm part of a little book club run by Sean of Sean Breeze Books, and this book was very well received when it was first published, but then it went out of print. And then a few years ago, it was kind of rediscovered and reprinted. And Sean heard about it and was intrigued by it. So it was kind of on his wish list, and he suggested it for the book club. It's a sort of intergenerational, sort of grandchildren, sort of reflecting back about the life of their grandmother, and so thinking back to the sort of tough days of the Midwest, and then bringing it up to sort of the 1980s. Yeah, I think we shall see. I really don't know what it's going to be like at all. If you've read it, tell me something in the comments. But yeah, I trust Sean, so if Sean's chosen it, I'm sure it will turn out to be a good one. One of the other readers in Sean's book club is Erin, and she and I have sort of connected there, and also on sort of Discord for Reading the Globe and various things. And she and I are doing a buddy read this month of a modern classic of Egyptian fiction. So this is Palace of Desire by Naguib Mahfouz. It was originally published in 1957. The translation, it's got 3 translators. Let me get their names right for you. William Maynard Hutchins, Lorne M. Kenny, and Olive E. Kenny. There you go. And I think the translation was done in 1991. And Mahfouz has a decent claim to being the greatest 20th century Egyptian author, certainly male. Male author. I read, this is the middle part of a trilogy. Okay, I read the first part of the trilogy 3 or 4 years ago. The first part is Palace Walk, and I was absolutely bowled over by that book. Really thought it was brilliant, and I've been meaning to move on and read the next part of the trilogy, but sometimes you kind of mean to do something and you just need an extra little push to do it. And I happened to mention it to Erin, or she mentioned it to me, and she's also read Palace Walk and wanted to read Palace of Desire, so we're using each other to actually get around to it. So I would say don't read this. If you haven't read any Mahfouz, read Palace Walk and see if you're as besotted by it as I was. There you go. Now, that little extra push to read old books is an interesting thing, isn't it? I love reading from sort of backlist and classic sort of authors, but I get seduced by new things. When new things arrive, you kind of want to read them whilst they're sort of excitingly newly published, and there's a bit of a buzz. But that can mean that the older stuff gets constantly pushed back because it'll always be there, so it doesn't feel quite so urgent. Happily, I have had that extra shove that I need this month to read a book I've never read by a favourite 19th century author. Okay. This is the book, Desperate Remedies by Thomas Hardy. Why am I reading this? Because the lovely Jen, the librarian, who's a big Hardy fan, has been inspired to host a kind of 18-month-long read-along of all of Thomas Hardy's novels in publication order. And this is the first month. This was his first novel. I've never read it, so I'm absolutely going to read this in June. My plan is not to read all of the novels, but to read the ones that the ones that I haven't yet read. I think there's 6 that I haven't yet read, and so I'm going to kind of hop in and out of this, reading the ones that will be new for me. And being hardy, this one would anticipate is going to be a bit dark, because his books usually are, and it is. But this one's a bit different. It apparently has sort of slightly sort of Wilkie Collins sort of almost sort of gothic-y. No, not super gothic. No, what's the word for it? Sensation novel vibe. It's got blackmail, it's got murder, it's got dangerous sort of passion. We shall see. It's a bit different from Hardy's other novels, and I'm very pleased to have been given that extra shove to read it. It also, as you can see, is longish. It doesn't look that fat, but tiny little print, and even with that tiny little print, little font, it's well over 400 pages, and that means that it works for another reading event, Big Book Summer, and which I mentioned earlier, didn't I? In relation to June on the Range and one day reading Lonesome Dove. But so this is absolutely going to be a Big Book Summer book for me. What is Big Book Summer? It's about reading longer books in the summer. So books that are 400 pages or more, and that we might sometimes swerve because we think, that's a bit long, it'll take the ages. So thank you to the host of that. The one that I know best is Melinda of Web Stories. The other host I'll put down below as well. And it's not the only longer book that I will be reading in June, because in May I started Praiseworthy by Alexis Wright, which is more like, 700 or 800 pages, and the wonderful Lindy of Lindy's Magpie Reads kind of gave me the shove to read that. That's a new book, but I was put off by its length, by suggesting that a small group of us read it half in May and half in June, so spreading it out. So I've read half of it, I've got the other half to read in June. It is a quite extraordinary but rather challenging book. I'm glad I'm reading it, but I'm also glad I've got some other readers to kind of ease me through it. It's Australian, and I'll talk more about it at the end of June when I've finished the whole book. Even more befuddling than Praiseworthy by Alexis Wright is Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, which I'm reading bits of in April, May and June, with, again, a small group of readers. We're not reading the whole book, so it won't count for Big Book Summer because, I'm not reading all of it. When I get to the end of June and finish the bits that we're reading together, I will have an idea of whether I want to actually attempt to read the whole thing from beginning to end. I'm not sure. I'm finding it really rewarding reading bits of it, but the whole thing, well, we'll see. The jury is out on that. There you go. So that is my June plan. I would love to hear about your June plan. I would love to hear if you've read any of these or want to read any of these. And I will be back soon with a roundup about the things I read in May.